Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of NCompass Live. I am your host, Krista Burns, here at the Nebraska Library Commission. NCompass Live is the Commission's weekly online event where we cover any sort of activities that would be of interest to Nebraska librarians across the state. We do these sessions every Wednesday morning live at 10 a.m. Central Time, and we have a mixture of things: presentations, interviews, web tours, little mini training sessions, anything we can think of that might be of interest to you out there. This morning we have our own staff that do these, and we have guest speakers. Today we have one of our staff here at the Commission, Emily Nimsakont, who is the cataloging librarian here at the Nebraska Library Commission, and she is going to tell us all about what's happening with genre headings. Library of Congress apparently decided to make changes, as happens, and so there's some new ways you need to deal with these, and Emily's going to take us through all that. Now I'll say I possibly will be quieter than usual during this. I'm not a cataloger. I've never been a real cataloger at all, so a lot of this may go over my head. But I'll be here paying attention and passing on any of the questions you guys may have to Emily. So go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Krista.
Oh, you want the mouse?
Oh, yeah, that'd be good. I'll see which. Yeah, I don't know. This touchpad throws me off sometimes, but
yes.
I will say I try to make this accessible to people who are not real catalogers too.
Well, there are a lot of people out there that are just doing what they can.
Right.
They're the basics and doing what they need
you're
to.
You're the director of a library and you want to make a decision about whether or not you want to use genre headings. You don't have to be a cataloger to, in order to benefit from this information. And so I've kept it kind of light on the mark. I know there are a few mark tags in here, I'll warn you, but but
I know those.
That's good. Thank you to everybody for attending. I'm pleased to see such a big group here. We had quite a good attendance this week.
Yeah.
And
obviously a very popular, disturbing subject.
Worrisome. Yeah, I think some of it has to do with the Library of Congress's recent announcement about how they're handling their genre headings. I also kind of think just in general, genre headings are becoming more and more popular. More people are considering using them. I think it has a lot to do with some newer catalog interfaces when they can do kind of faceted searching where you can refine your search after you've done a search, refine your results, and so genre headings are kind of more important in that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on too. But first, it's always good to start a topic by defining what you're talking about. I always start with kind of an official definition or a published definition, something other than just what I make up of a topic. So let's talk about what is a genre heading. Obviously, it's a heading in your catalog that deals with genre information. And here's kind of a nice, succinct definition of genre. A genre is a category that is identifiable by some of the following characteristics: style, plot, device, mood or tone, character type, and theme. This comes from the Guidelines on Subject Access to Individual Works of Fiction, Drama, etc., which was a vocabulary published by the American Library Association. And you can see it says subject access in the title, but it does also have genre terms. So basically, I think of a genre as kind of a category of content. It deals with the intellectual content of an item, but it's a little bit different than what the subject is. It's sort of the category, the type of content you're dealing with. And I kind of alluded to something there that most people, when they're thinking about genre headings and thinking about how to define them, they want to think about how they're different from subject headings. Why would you use these in addition to subject headings in your catalogs? And basically, it's just summed up most easily by saying a genre heading describes what something is, while a subject heading describes what something is about. And it's kind of, isness versus aboutness. It's kind of, an easy definition that's offered, but it really is what captures the difference between a genre and a subject. For example, if you have, say, the movie The Lord of the Rings, one of the Lord of the Rings movies, that is a fantasy film, and so fantasy films would be the genre heading you could use for that. By contrast, subject headings for the Lord of the Rings, what is it about would be, I don't know, Frodo Baggins, gold rings, epic journeys. Yeah. I don't know if that's even an authorized subject heading, but but those are the type of things that describe what the movie is about rather than what it is. So that's kind of the basic thing to wrap your head around with genre headings. We're talking about what it is, what type of category of content it belongs to, that type of thing. And this can get kind of confusing because the same term can be used as both subject headings and genre headings. For example, if you had a book called The Animated Movie Guide that had, reviews of animated movies, summaries, things like that, and so that would be something that is about animated films. And so in that case, animated films would be used as a subject heading. However, if you were cataloging the movie WALL-E, for example, that is an animated film, so that would be a genre heading in that case. Another thing that I think is kind of important to think about when you're dealing with the definition of what a genre is how it differs from perhaps the form of an item. And these two things are kind of lumped together a lot. In fact, when we get talking about the Library of Congress's new vocabulary, you'll see that it's called the Library of Congress genre form terms. So they serve similar purposes, but they're a little bit different. And sometimes it's hard to say where exactly the dividing line between a genre and a form is, but a genre is the type of thing we've been talking about, a category of content, an action-adventure film, jazz radio programs. They tell you a little bit about what the intellectual content is. Whereas a form deals more with either the physical format, like a globe, it tells you what the thing physically is, or the purpose that it's designed for, like a feature film. It tells you it's a full-length film and not a short flick. And so, you could have both. You could have something that is in the genre of action-adventure films, but still also have the form of a feature film. Or that last example, video recordings for the hearing impaired, that's something that's used for like closed caption film. And so that really doesn't tell you a lot about the genre, but it does tell you about what the form is. And so these things kind of appear together a lot of the time. They serve similar purposes, but there's a little bit of a distinction. And one thing that can get kind of confusing with that is that if you look closely at the Library of Congress genre terms, they're actually kind of genre and form together. You can see that we're telling you it's in the action and adventure genre, but we're also telling you that it's a film. It's not an action and adventure story. It's not an action and adventure radio program. So really the Library of Congress terms are kind of genre and form working together. Now, since a lot of what I'm dealing with today is the recent changes to the Library of Congress genre terms, I thought I'd cover briefly kind of a history of the Library of Congress and their involvement with genres. They've been doing subject headings for a lot longer than they've been doing genre terms. Let's see, I've got my spelled out acronyms written down here to make sure I get these correct, but it kind of, yeah.
I was going to say librarians love their acronyms,
we do.
But I've discovered by just, every profession has that kind of problem.
Yeah, we think that we're acronym heavy, but really, yeah.
Everybody likes to shorten it.
It makes it sound special, I don't know. That MBRS is the Motion Picture Broadcasting and Recorded Sound Division of the Library of Congress, and they had their own thesaurus, the Moving Image Genre Form Guide, that's the MIGFG there. And they were kind of stretched thin trying to maintain it, and so in 2003 they asked the Library of Congress Policy and Standards Division if maybe they could be merged with the subject headings, and so the maintenance could be taken care of together. And they thought that was a good idea, and so I think it was maybe actually 2007 was when they started work on these new terms, and these dealt with moving image terms, and I think they also had recorded sound as well. And it wasn't until 2009 that these terms were officially issued as part of the Library of Congress subject headings. But it was a little bit confusing having them as part of the subject headings, even though they were technically genre terms. So in June of 2010, a separate vocabulary was created, and that's kind of what we're focusing on for the first part of the presentation here. That's the Library of Congress genre form terms. And so a separate vocabulary was created, but it still consisted of the moving images and the recording sound terms. And they've expanded it a little bit since then. In September of 2010, the terms for cartographic materials were issued. And just very recently, in June of this year, the terms for law materials were issued.
This is all very recent stuff they've been doing. They've just been cranking this stuff out.
Yeah, exactly. It's really one of their major focuses at this point, I think. And so, yeah, it's a lot of new stuff here. We're used to dealing with subjects, but genres are a lot of change, and even more is on the way, as we'll see. So, as I said, this new vocabulary, relatively new, is the Library of Congress Genre Form Terms for Library and Archival Materials. That really long name gets a slightly less long acronym of LCGFT. As we said, we're acronym happy here in the library profession. And it was established in June of 2010, as I said. It first appeared in print in the 32nd edition of the Library of Congress subject headings, the good old red books. They came out last year, and if you're wondering where it is It's this slim little volume alongside of your big red books. It's this
they saw that, yeah.
supplementary vocabularies volume that goes along with the subject headings. It's got things like the children's subject headings and the genre terms. So if you have the most recent edition of the LCSH, you have these terms available to you in print form. But the biggest change, that happened last year, and the biggest recent change was that new authority records were officially issued for these terms on May 24th of this year. And up to this point, these terms existed, but they kind of were still considered to be the same thing as subject headings. Their authority records had subject heading control numbers on them. Even though you could search genre separately in like OCLC connection, they still were in a lot of ways treated the same as subject headings. And so now we have these new authority records. And so if you search, for example, in OCLC connection, this is a screenshot from that program, you will find the genre headings, and they can be determined by the 155 field instead of a 150 field for a topical subject heading. The big thing you'll notice is that the control numbers have changed. They now have new control numbers that begin with the prefix GF to indicate that they are genre form terms. They used to all, even though they had 150 tags, they used to still be considered subject headings as far as the control numbers went. So they had the SH prefix on their control numbers. And now that appears in the subfield Z to indicate that it's a no longer valid number, but it's still there for reference. The other big difference that you'll notice is that in the 040 field, there will be a subfield F telling you that this is a Library of Congress genre form term, that LCGFT acronym, the code appears there. So this is what to look for when you're looking for the new authority records as they've been reissued in May. Okay, I did say not too much mark, but we are going to have a little bit of mark coding here, just to cover what the correct mark tags to use for genre headings are. And again, this is another area where you kind of primarily think of it in terms of how it's different from subject headings. Subject headings for topical subjects is 650. They go in a 650 tag. And genre headings go in a 655 tag. Now this is not a change from how it's been done. Even when the Library of Congress genre terms existed as part of the subject headings, they were still assigned a 655 tag. They went in a 655 field. However, there is a little bit of change, as you may notice. This is how it was done previously. When the top one that says old, when the genre terms were part of the subject headings officially, you would put them in a 655 field with the second indicator of 0 to indicate that it comes from the Library of Congress subject headings, and then just put your term in a subfield A. Now, the new way is a little bit different, and this is if you're using the new authority records. It still goes in a 655 field, but now you'll notice that the second indicator is 7. And this is because now that the Library of Congress genre form terms exist as their own vocabulary, they're not the Library of Congress subject headings anymore. They are a whole separate source of terms. And the second indicator of 7 indicates that it's from a source other than the Library of Congress, and it's indicated in that subfield 2. So if you're using these genre terms, you should use the 655 with the second indicator of 7, and then in subfield 2, use the code that indicates where you got this term from. And don't worry, you don't have to know that off the top of your head. If you're only using the Library of Congress terms, it's pretty easy to remember the LCGFT, but the codes are available on the Library of Congress website on their standards. And I just do want to mention that you don't have to be madly scrambling to write down URLs at this point. Oh, no.
Well, when we do the recording for this, and you guys will all be sent the link to it, all of these URLs will be put up into our Delicious accounts. You get a link to them there. So, yeah, don't worry about writing it down now. And you'll have the PowerPoint as well, too.
Sounds good. But if by chance you don't remember that LCGFT code, or you have other vocabularies that we're using, we will talk about a little bit later about some other vocabularies that are out there. So if you want to look up what the codes for that are, you can always go to this website. Does anybody have any questions so far? I don't want to barrel on ahead here. We're going to switch gears a little bit here.
If you have any questions, type them into the questions section of your GoToWebinar interface. or just say you want me to unmute you and I can do that for you.
All right. Well, we're going to switch gears just a little bit here and talk about which disciplines have genre headings. You know, as I mentioned, we were talking about some of the ones that are being issued sort of piece by piece for specific areas of content. There currently aren't genre terms for all types of materials. And I do want to clarify that when I say that there aren't genre terms for all types of materials, I mean in the Library of Congress genre form terms. There are other vocabularies, and we'll talk about those a little bit at the end, but right now there are only 6 areas that have Library of Congress terms, and so we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. The first one is law materials, and as I mentioned, this is the one that is most recent. Just in June of this year, these were officially issued for use. And this is not an area that I work with a lot. I'm not a law cataloger, but
yeah,
I can see.
We don't have a lot of that here.
Yeah, it would be an area in which it would be useful to be able to distinguish certain types of genres. And so some of their examples are things like treaties, case books, law reviews, and executive orders. The second newest category is cartographic materials, maps, and things like that. And this is an area in which probably some of them are more form terms, like globes and maps. They indicate sort of the physical format that an item is in, but they also have some genre terms that indicate the type of a particular map, like relief models or astronomical models. They refer to kind of the category of the content that's covered by the particular maps. Let's see, sound recordings was one of the original categories, and a lot of these deal with radio programs. I think that was something that the recorded sound division focuses on a lot, so they have things like jazz radio programs, or you'll see sports radio and news programs. But, for example, you could use this for if you have recorded oral history interviews. There is a term for oral histories. I also think there's a term for podcasts. Yeah. If you happen to be cataloging podcasts, right. That would be considered a genre term, and it would be under sound recordings. Or even, I think there is a term for audiobooks, if you'd like to use that for audiobooks in your catalog. Television programs is also another type of discipline that has genre terms, again, because it was started with the moving pictures and visual items. That's definitely something that they're pretty strong in. Things like domestic comedy television programs, religious television programs, reality television programs. So if you're cataloging anything to do with reality TV, or anything that is an example of reality TV, you have a genre heading for that. And again, one of the original categories was motion pictures. And these are things you would use for movies that you're cataloging, things like action and adventure films. For working with documentaries, there's a genre term for that. Propaganda films is another topic that exists. And the last category is video recordings. And I'll say a little bit in a second about the difference between motion pictures and video recordings. But for now, there's a few examples. There really aren't a whole lot of terms that apply specifically to video recording. This is a very, very specific category, but this is, for example, where you would find video recordings for the hearing impaired, a genre term that you might like to use for closed caption items in your collection. Now, you might be a little bit confused about the difference between motion picture terms and video recording terms, and I don't blame you if you are. It kind of deals with the fact that the Library of Congress themselves, they do not catalog like VHS or DVD things. They stick to motion pictures, which are the actual reels of film that movies are originally issued on. And so for them, they're motion picture terms. But it would be kind of silly if they were using a set of terms for motion pictures and everybody else who was cataloging video recordings had, you know, their own, you know, it was action and adventure films versus action and adventure video recordings or something like that. It would just kind of separate things unnecessarily. And so they've kind of made the decision that the motion picture headings represent the intellectual content of the item rather than the physical format. If you're familiar with like the Ferber levels of work, expression, manifestation, and item and all, these genre terms are up on the work and expression level, the more of the abstract and not the actual physical item in your hand. So that's how they handle that. And so if you're cataloging movies, even if it's a DVD, you should use the motion picture headings, even though it says films and you're technically not cataloging a piece of film. The motion picture headings are the ones that you should use. Whereas the video recording ones, to go back the screen, like the video recordings for the hearing impaired, the closed captioning is not going to be something that appears on the actual reels of film. That's something that's done to video recordings only, so that's why that's for that type of heading and not for motion pictures. Now there are other categories that are in progress. Music is being worked on right now, and I believe these are terms both for printed sheet music and for recordings of music. Somebody who knows more about music cataloging could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that is the case. It is in progress right now. I've heard that no earlier than 2012, so I guess it could be later than 2012 that they will be officially issued and able to be used, but they are in progress. Work on religious materials started this year, actually last year in 2010, and they have not been issued yet, and I don't think I know of a target date for when they'll be done, but those are also in progress. And literature is in progress, and this is probably something that people in general collections are waiting for. If you have a lot of books and you want to be able to use genre terms, official Library of Congress genre terms for them, that's probably something you're waiting for. People who work with specialized collections like legal materials or, cartographic materials, they're probably satisfied with ones that exist, but people in more general collections are probably waiting for book terms to come out. Work has not started on that yet. I hear that it is anticipated that the work will start sometime this year. And so it's seeming like it takes 2 years once they start working on it, so, maybe 3-4 years down the road you might have literature terms. That would be my guess.
Yeah. I do have a question here.
Yeah.
A question from, she says, a relatively new cataloger. If the genre form is from the GSAFD, which do you use, that or the Library of Congress, LC?
That's a good question. If you have made the decision in your catalog that you're using terms from the GSAFD, which is the Guidelines for Subject Access for Fiction and Drama, which I referenced on one of the earlier slides, if you are using that genre or that thesaurus, then definitely go ahead and use that code, that abbreviation, GSAFD, in your subfield 2 for your 655 fields. So now you can look up and see if there's a comparable term in the Library of Congress film for like comedy films. But it just depends on which thesaurus you've decided to use. So if you're using the GSAFD, then definitely go ahead and use that code in your genre headings from the subfield 2. Does that answer your question?
So basically, you've got to decide which way you want to go.
Right, exactly.
Go with it.
And so, and so
because you do want consistency.
People probably started using the GSAFD because the Library of Congress terms didn't exist.
Right, it's all they had.
That preceded it, and so now you kind of have to make a decision. Do you want to stick with that, or do you want to kind of bring everything into the Library of Congress fold?
Mm-hmm. So you're making a decision to change over to the new.
Right,
stuff.
or you could use multiple ones. I've got some slides at the end talking about maybe the challenges of using multiple thesauri, so you could do that too. But if whichever one you're using, just make sure that the code matches up with that, and make a decision and stick to it. That's a good question. That's a very important thing to point out. And kind of along those lines, it actually makes a nice segue into my next topic. If you want to use genre terms for disciplines that don't have official genre terms yet, they don't have terms in either GSAFD or the Library of Congress genre form terms, you can still use subject terms for disciplines that don't have genre terms. This was kind of practice, back when the Library of Congress genre terms were officially still part of the subject headings, but they were issued with 655 tags. If something with the 655 didn't exist, you could still use a topical subject heading like children's literature and use it as a genre term if you wanted to, as long as there was a valid topical term for it. And that is still the case. And this gets back into the area where it's a little bit confusing because you can use the same term for a subject heading as you can for a genre heading. For example, if you have this reference guide to mystery and detective fiction, this is not something that is a detective and mystery story. It's something that is about detective and mystery stories. So this is a valid Library of Congress subject heading, and this is how you would use that heading for a subject heading in this record for this item. However, if you have an actual book that is a detective or mystery story, like the Maltese Falcon, you can go ahead and use that topical subject heading as a genre term. You can put it in a 655 field and go ahead and use the exact same heading because it exists as a valid topical heading. Now, one thing to notice about this is that the second indicator is still a 0 in this case. Because we're using a Library of Congress subject heading as a genre term, you still want to indicate that it came from the Library of Congress subject headings, which is what the second indicator of 0 is used to indicate. So if you're using a topical term as a genre heading, still put it in a 655 field and use the second indicator of 0. Now what you may be wondering at this point is, do genre terms replace form subdivisions? You know, there is another way to indicate genre and form information in our subject headings, and that's the subfield V, form subdivision. And so some people think that because the Library of Congress is really focusing this push on issuing new genre terms, that maybe they're getting rid of form subdivisions. The answer is usually no. They do not replace form subdivisions. You can go ahead and use the form subdivisions in your catalog record and then provide genre headings in addition to those subject headings. So for example, these are the subject headings and genre headings. I believe The Italian Job was the movie that I got these from. And so they have two topical subject headings, and they've specified that this is a drama form when they're subfield B. But then you go ahead and use your genre terms on top of that, in addition to that. So they've got two 655 fields that have a subfield 7, or a second indicator of 7, and indicate they come from the Library of Congress genre form terms. The one case in which form subdivisions have been canceled in favor of using genre terms was with the cartographic materials, the maps. And in that case, they have changed the form subdivisions. Anything that is a map form subdivision qualified by a particular type of maps, like this one for topographic maps, those subdivisions have been canceled. And so where you would normally, you used to have a heading like this, now the proper way to do it is to just use the form subdivision of maps without specifying the type, and then use a separate genre heading with the type of map. So in this case, you'd still have your heading, your geographical heading in this case, with the form subdivision, but then you'd also have a genre heading in addition that gets a little bit more specific. So the maps are the one exception to the rule here. Now to kind of change gears a little bit here, I did want to point out something kind of interesting about the Library of Congress genre form terms, and that is that they're conceived as a faceted system of headings, which is a little bit different than how the subject headings are handled, so I wanted to take a minute and talk about that. Now, as I mentioned, I do always kind of like to start with a official definition when I'm introducing a new topic, like facets. And I thought
Especially if you don't have a clue.
Yeah, exactly.
Know.
And I thought it was kind of funny when I went looking for a definition of facets, was that in the Library of Congress FAQs about genre headings, they talk about facets, and they say the library community has yet to agree on a standard definition of the word faceting.
Nice.
Which is always reassuring to hear. But I did find a definition of facet, regardless of what the library community may think, from Merriam-Webster. They define a facet as any of the definable aspects that make up a subject. So, you know, a geographical facet or a topical facet or something. It's just one particular aspect that you have parceled out to emphasize about something. But when pressed, the Library of Congress does definition that faceting is coding single terms or phrases representing individual concepts separately in the bibliographic record. And so basically the individual concepts is the important thing to remember about facets, in my opinion. You know, it's not mashing a geographic term together with a topical term and creating this big long string like we see with some of the subject headings. It's individually parceling out individual aspects of a particular item that's being cataloged. So for example, it might be a little bit clearer to look at some examples of this. The Library of Congress subject headings are definitely not faceted. I mean, that you can get these long strings of headings that are subdivided. You know, in this case, soil, Nebraska maps are all strung together. And you know, there's not a topical heading for soils and a geographic heading for Nebraska and a form heading for maps. They're strung together. That's not faceted because it doesn't allow you to pull things apart when you're sorting search results, for example. On the other hand, the Library of Congress genre form terms are designed to be faceted. So if you had a feature-length film that was about sports and it also was a comedy, you would have 3 separate genre terms: sports films, comedy films, and feature films. You know, you won't find things like sports feature films or comedy feature films or things that combine more than one aspect together, because this kind of makes for better sorting after the fact. You know, there are comedy films that are not sports films, and if you want to be able to kind of group this item with either of those things, you don't want to mash together in one heading. I kind of think one of the ways to think about the effects of facets in faceted systems that you could see is, you know, commercial sites. A lot of e-commerce types thing, when you buy something online, like this is a screenshot from Amazon, they provide faceting of results so that after you do a search, you can narrow down your results by particular facets. So in this case, you know, I've searched for books on cataloging and classification, and you'll see along the side that you can narrow it down to what department you're looking for. So you can say, yes, I only want nonfiction books about cataloging. I can't imagine that a fiction book about cataloging would be that interesting. So maybe these are all nonfiction, but who knows? Or, you know, they have down there at the bottom, one of the facets is format. So you can specify you want the paperback format or the hardcover format or the Kindle edition. So it's, you know, but they have separated that out. So you are not stuck saying nonfiction paperbacks. They're separated into separate categories, separate facets, so that you can sort your results after the fact and narrow them down. And so you'll see this a lot in library catalogs these days. A lot of the newer interfaces are offering faceted browsing. Once you've got your results, you can narrow things down. This is a screenshot from the Lincoln City Libraries, which is actually the Pioneer shared catalog now. And so you'll see one of their facets is which library is it located in. Is it located in Lincoln or is it located in Grand Island? You can narrow that down. Authors is one of the facets on the side. And so I think that genres are, as I was saying before, kind of coming into play more. More people want to use them because they see their possibilities in these faceted systems. And I'm going to talk a little bit later on about some of the different ways you can make use of genre headings, but faceting is one of them. And so I think that's important to realize that, in particular, the Library of Congress genre form terms were designed as a faceted system, so you can kind of pull apart these different things rather than having long strings like subject headings do that can't be pulled apart quite so easily. Another way in which the Library of Congress genre form terms are intended as a faceted system is they've been designed to not repeat information that's found elsewhere in the record. They feel it allows for better faceting and probably just less duplication of effort if, you know, for example, the information about what language an item appears in is found in the 041 field or in some of the fixed fields, and so they've decided that there won't be genre terms dealing with the language of an item because that would just be repeating unnecessarily and not really provide good faceting in that way. All right, let's get into maybe some of the more practical application of this. If you want to use these Library of Congress genre form terms in your catalog, where do you find them? Where do you get the authority records? Where do you find out what the authorized terms are? And some of this is kind of a recap, but I just want to make sure people know where this information is available to them. As I said before, they are issued in the print version, the latest version of the Red Books, the Library of Congress subject headings. They're in this slim little volume on the side with the supplemental vocabularies. And they are available in OCLC Connection currently. This was when the new authority records were issued on May 24th of this year. They immediately were loaded into OCLC Connection. And so if you want to browse, genre is an option in the drop-down menu when you're browsing Connection. And it also is available in search. You can choose to search genre terms. And this has always been available, as I said before, even when they were part of the subject headings. Okay, I shouldn't say always, but recently it's been available. Even when they were part of subject headings, there was a separate genre index that you could search for the authority records that had them in the 155 field. However, these now reflect the new authority records with their new control numbers that indicate clearly that they are genre form terms and not subject headings. They are also available for free at the Library of Congress Authorities website. I always like to mention this because not everybody subscribes to OCLC Connection. And so
the Library of Congress has been great about putting up all their stuff out there free for anyone to get a hold of, which is great. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have to say that finding the genre terms is not the most user-friendly thing on the authorities website. I went back and checked this just this morning. I don't know if everybody knows, but this presentation was originally supposed to be 3 weeks ago.
Yes, yeah, we had some technical difficulties.
And so just to make sure that nothing had changed since I originally created this presentation, I went back just this morning and looked at authorities.loc.gov, and they still do not have a separate genre index for you to search. So right now, if you click on that Search Authorities, you get this screen, and you can choose from subject, name, title, things like that. What you don't see is a separate genre search, which would make things a lot easier, but for now you can search the genre terms as part of the subject authority headings. So if you have an idea of what you want to search for, like jazz radio programs, you can type that in, and you will get the new authority records. They have the 155 field for the authorized term, and they do have the new control number that begins with the GF prefix, but they just haven't separated it out into a separate index, and I hope there are plans to do that. I don't know for sure that there are. I should also say that the Library of Congress has the new authority records available as part of Classification Web, but of course that also requires a subscription, so it's not a free source like this is. So if you're willing to put up with a little bit of a hassle and you don't subscribe to Connection or Classification Web, you can get them from the authorities website. So I wanted to make sure people know that. So once you've got them, you know where to find them, how can you make use of them? What do these add to our catalogs? Well, even if you don't, separate out the index or anything like that, you can, of course, always make use of them as supplemental information for keyword searching. If you include them in your keyword search, for example, I did a search in this catalog in the keyword for movies, and that doesn't appear anywhere on the public display, but they do have a 655 field with movies. And this isn't a local field or term. They've obviously chosen not to use the Library of Congress terms for this, but it's something that I saw a need that their users were searching for movies.
People are typing it in, yeah.
You gotta give them what they want, help them find it. So there you go. That's one possible use of genre terms. Whether you use Library of Congress terms or your own, you can always use them to supplement the keyword searching in your catalog. You can index them together with your subject terms. So when somebody does a subject search, they're not only looking for items about a topic, they could be looking for items that are a particular topic, like mystery items. Here's another catalog. I did a subject topic keyword search, so it's specifically searching the subject fields for mystery. And I came up with a video recording of the TV show Monk. And in their 655 field, so it's a genre term, it has detective and mystery television programs. So even though I searched the subject index, they've set it up so that their 655 field is included in this index, so that when somebody searches for mystery in subjects, they can also find ones that have mystery in the genre terms. And you can also index them separately. You can have a separate genre search. I had to look kind of long and hard to find a catalog that does this. A lot of the local ones around here, I found that there wasn't necessarily a practice people are doing, and I don't know if it's because their system don't support it or if it's because they just chosen not to. They don't know, maybe they didn't think their patrons would use it. But this is actually from a college library in Pennsylvania, and I found they are using a separate genre search. And so from their catalog homepage, if you click on genre, you're taken to a screen where you can search simply for genre terms. And one thing I noticed about it is that they have kind of provided search examples like historical fiction or detective and mystery stories. And that kind of emphasized something to me about if you make the choice to have a genre index, you're probably going to have to provide some prompts so that people know the correct terms to use. the one difficult thing about it. And it's actually probably, one difficult thing about having a subject search. People don't always know the correct controlled vocabulary term to use, and so they can't make as much use of it. And, it's maybe better to start with the keyword and then narrow it down from there. But I did notice that this catalog at the bottom, I don't know if you can read that bottom line, but it says, for help finding films of a certain genre, see our guide, Searching for Films by Genre. And they've actually created a whole other web page where they have all of the possible film genres you could search for broken down, and each of those hyperlinks goes to a search that they've done in their catalog, so it shows you all the results for their action and adventure movies or their black comedy movies, and so it's really a nice extra service they've done to help people search for particular genres of film. I can assume they've done it because they get a lot of use for their film collection and a lot of people who want to search by genre. So I thought it was cool that they did that, but I also think it kind of points out one of the problems with genre searching is that if people don't know the right terms, they might not be able to make use of your genre terms as much as you would like them to.
Yeah, it's not going to help them if they don't know what to put in.
Exactly. Yeah. They see a box that says genre. Half of them might not even know what genre means, let alone the right terms to search for, that it can help them find action movies or something like that. Which, again, not to beat a dead horse, but it's going back to why I think facets are a really good way to use genre terms. Because people probably don't go to a catalog necessarily knowing that they definitely want something that's available, as terms of, some of the more form type terms like audiobooks. They're not going to say, I want an audiobook. They're going to say, I want this particular book, and then if they happen to see after the fact that it's available in audiobook form.
They may come in for that kind of thing, like people who do like the audiobooks, yes, but yeah, you never know.
You never know.
You need to have it work
right.
for both. Yeah.
So I think that an interesting way that a lot of newer systems are making use of genre terms are to provide facets that you can narrow after the fact. So there is a content type facet in this catalog. I believe this is the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and I would load that up a little bit for you. You can see that things like documentary films or the video recordings for the hearing impaired, biographical television programs, those are genre terms. Now there are also, I can tell that they probably brought in other sources of terms for their genre index, things like juvenile literature or, let's see, handbooks and manuals, etc. These are obviously form subdivisions that come from subfield B in their subject headings, so they've obviously created their genre index or the content type facet from a number of different sources in the record. So I would be kind of interested to see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff and how they created that. But so it's not purely just 655 fields here. It's a number of sources brought together. But I think it's kind of an interesting solution to how to help people find particular genres. And as I've been saying all along, there's no reason you should think that the Library of Congress genre-informed terms are the only terms that you can use. There are other vocabularies out there, and it's kind of an alphabet soup of a bunch of different acronyms, so just to prepare you for a bunch of acronyms being thrown at you. As I've mentioned before, and some people have been mentioning in the comments that that's what they use, the GSAFD, the Guidelines on Subject Access to Individual Works of Fiction, Drama, etc. And this is where you will be able to find literature terms. If you do want to use genre terms for a particular type of book, then you don't want to wait until they get the Library of Congress ones figured out, GSAFD. The other ones on this screen, they also, one thing they have in common is they have subject terms as well as genre terms, but I do want to mention them for the fact that they have genre terms, like the thesaurus for graphic materials. And you will notice about these three that they're keyed towards very specialized type of items again. Thesaurus for graphic materials is used largely for visual items, photographs, things like that. The art and architecture thesaurus has genre terms, but they mostly relate to, obviously, art and architecture. The medical subject headings have things that they call public types, and so those can be used for genre terms. There's moving image materials, which is maintained through the Library of Congress. They're out there, the Radio Form Genre Guide. Again, these are very specialized types of vocabularies. They're not as kind of all-purpose as you might think the Library of Congress one will eventually be. And there's ones used for rare book cataloging. So these are out there, and I should mention all of these on these links, they are available for free, that you can get access to these terms. And so if you're going to use any of these, just remember to use the correct code in your subfield 2 in your 655 field, so you can specify which source these came from. And as I mentioned before, you can use more than one of these. There's no reason you have to stick to just one thesaurus. But there are some things you'll probably need to take into consideration as practical considerations if you're using multiple ones. You want to make sure you know whether or not all of your 655s are going to be indexed, if you want them all to be indexed together, or if you want to have maybe separate indexes for different thesauri. You'll have to watch for conflicts between terms in different thesauri. And this is something that you might already have encountered if you use different subject heading thesauri, like if you use the regular Library of Congress subject headings and the children's headings. You know, if the LCSH says swine and the children's headings say pigs, that's kind of, you know, you want to make decisions about what you want to do with that. You'll especially want to watch if one thesaurus uses a particular term as an authorized term and it's used as a C reference in another thesaurus. That might kind of create some wonky things in your authority files, so you will have to take that into account. And then you want to make sure that you can get authority records for all terms, or that you create them locally if you can't download them from somewhere. Those of you who have attended some of my presentations in the past know that I like to give you a lot of resources. I like to point out the sources that I've used to find information on these things. And a really good presentation that I found when I was looking for information on genre headings was done by M. Schiff at the University of Washington. And he has his PowerPoint slides out there about decisions they've made about genre headings. They do use a couple of different vocabularies. It's an older presentation. I think it's from maybe 2004, so I don't actually know if this is what they're doing currently, but I thought it did a good job of outlining some of the decision processes you would have to go through if you were going to create a genre index, and if you were going to decide what sources that information was pulled from, and if you were going to work with multiple thesauri. And so it's a really good practical source of information. Which transitions well into my very last topic, which are some other good sources of information. The Library of Congress does have a website. The URL is there, and they keep it pretty well updated with information about what is going on with their genre headings. You can see they break it down into the different types of materials, so you can, if you're interested in when the musical work material headings are going to be available, for example, you can keep your eye on that. One resource in particular that I wanted to point out is the FAQ that they have available. This is very, very useful. This is what I had in front of me here with the definition of facets. But they have just kind of identified a lot of the common concerns that people have about genre headings, and so I would definitely recommend checking out that FAQ if you're looking for information on genre headings. And recently, in preparation for the new authority records, OCLC offered a couple of free webinars about genre form headings, and the recording of that and the slides from that are available, and I found that very useful, so I would definitely recommend taking a look at that if you weren't able to attend that when they first aired in May. And at this point, does anybody have any more questions?
If you have any questions, type them into your questions section on your GoToWebinar interface there, or if you want to use your microphone, we encourage it. If you
yes,
have one, we can unmute you and you can ask your question that way. And you can see we already have the link up there for where the, you already put all these into our Delicious,
yeah,
right?
the links are already in the Delicious. Yes, the slides are not up there yet on that SlideShare address, but they will be recording goes out. So
that's the URL for all the links that were mentioned during the session. But when we do send you the, when I do post up the recording, I'll also put that as a link into our recording information as well, so you have that. And then the slides will go to, like, yes, the Commission SlideShare account for you to access and download as you want to. So anybody have any questions, comments, anything for Emily while we're still here? Nobody's typed anything in yet.
Always feel free to contact me. My contact information is up there. I'd be happy to answer questions about this at any time.
Just thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you for attending.
All right. Doesn't look like anybody has any urgent questions right now. Like Emily said, yeah, if you do, as you do get into watching this again, going through figuring out what the genre headings, Emily's happy to answer any questions you have. Her info is there. This was recorded, and we'll be sending you the link out to the recording today or tomorrow, so you can watch it again later. Share it with any of your colleagues that you know that might be interested in this that couldn't make it today. So I think since nobody seems to have any questions about Emily's topic, that's cool. We will wrap it up for this morning. And We hope you'll join us next week on NCompass Live when our topic is something very, very new, Google+. If you've been invited to it, if you're in it, or if you're wondering what the heck it is that everyone's talking about, Michael Sowers, our Technology Innovation Librarian here at the Library Commission, will be doing a session next week about Google+. What it's all about, how it works, I don't know. Whatever he wants to share about that. So go to our website, register for that one if you want to. That'll be our topic for next week. So it looks like no questions, urgent questions have come up while I've been talking. So there's some thank yous. So thank you very much, Emily. I'm glad we finally got this one done.
Yes.
Our technical issues a few weeks ago were very disturbing. Yes, everything, the whole world seemed to crash on us all at once at like 10 a.m.
Of course, it would have to be
yeah.
10 o'clock.
So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.